"If you refuse me, I won't live," she said, and Rancher takes her home. The morning sun spread golden light across the wide open fields of the ranch. The rancher, a man named Daniel, was already hard at work. His hands were rough from years of labor, and his skin carried the tan of someone who had spent decades under the sun. He moved with calm determination, tending to the cattle, checking fences, and making sure everything was in order. The ranch was his life, his routine, and he liked it that way. There was a certain peace in the repetition, a rhythm that made life feel predictable and safe. But that morning, something unusual stirred at the edge of the property.
Daniel noticed movement near the old wooden fence that marked the boundary between his land and the open trail beyond.
At first he thought it might be a stray animal, perhaps a dog or a deer. But as he walked closer, he saw it was a person. A young woman was standing there, her figure small and fragile against the vast expanse of the ranch. She looked lost, as if she didn't know where to go or what to do. Her clothes were simple, slightly worn, and her hair, tangled from the wind, fell across her face. Daniel slowed his steps. He was a man who trusted people cautiously, especially strangers. But something about her made him stop and take notice. She was trembling. Her hands clutched tightly to her chest. Her eyes were wide, filled with a fear he had rarely seen. There was a weight in her gaze, a silent cry for help that made his chest tighten. The woman's voice broke the silence, small but urgent. "Please," she said, her words shaky. "If you refuse me, I won't live." Daniel froze. The words struck him like a sudden storm. He had heard people speak dramatically before, exaggerating for effect, but there was no exaggeration in her tone. He could hear the raw fear, the desperation that seemed to cling to every word. He looked at her closely, trying to understand, but her eyes were already darting around, scanning the open land as if searching for an escape. "Hey," Daniel called gently, keeping his distance. "Slow down. Tell me what's wrong." "Who are you?" The woman's lips trembled and she swallowed hard. Her voice came out in a whisper, barely audible over the wind. "I can't. I have nowhere else to go." "Please, I need someone to take me, to help me. Please, I can't go back." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His life had been quiet, predictable, and safe. And suddenly, this stranger had thrown everything into uncertainty. But there was something in him that refused to turn away. Maybe it was the sense of duty. Or maybe it was the human instinct to help someone in danger. Whatever it was, he knew he couldn't leave her there alone. "Come on," he said carefully, taking a step closer but keeping a respectful distance. "You can come with me. We'll figure this out." Her eyes searched his face as if looking for a lie, for any hint that he might turn her away. When she saw only sincerity, only a quiet calm that contrasted with the chaos in her own heart, she nodded slowly. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment she seemed unable to move. Then, with a shiver, she took a hesitant step forward, allowing Daniel to guide her away from the fence and into the ranch. As they walked, Daniel noticed the small details that spoke of her struggle. Her clothes were worn, not torn, but they carried the dust and faint stains of a long journey. Her shoes were scuffed, and her feet seemed sore from walking. Her hands shook slightly, not from the cold, but from the fear and exhaustion she carried. He felt a deep sense of responsibility rising in his chest. This was not a casual visitor. This was someone who needed help, someone whose life might depend on the kindness of a stranger. When they reached the small house near the center of the ranch, Daniel opened the door and motioned for her to enter. The woman hesitated for a moment, looking around as if fearing the next step, then crossed the threshold. Inside, the house smelled faintly of wood smoke and the clean scent of a well-kept home. It was simple, with basic furniture, but it was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold uncertainty outside. Daniel offered her a seat at the small kitchen table. He could see her shoulders tense, her body stiff with fear and caution. He poured a glass of water and handed it to her. She took it with trembling hands, her eyes downcast, and drank slowly, as if trying to convince herself that she was safe. "You're safe here," Daniel said quietly. "No one is going to hurt you. You can stay as long as you need." The woman looked up then, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, there was a flicker of hope, a fragile sense of trust. Breaths. She spoke in a voice, barely above a whisper.
I don't know how to thank you.
Breaths. I thought no one would care, Britt. Daniel shook his head gently. "It's okay. You don't need to thank me. Just rest for now."
We'll take it one step at a time.
The woman nodded, her body sagging as the tension began to leave her muscles. She looked around the room, taking in the simple comforts, the warm light streaming through the windows, the wooden table, the small stove in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was safety, and that was enough for her now. As the morning passed, Daniel went about his usual chores, occasionally glancing out the window to make sure she was still settled. He felt an odd mix of emotions: concern, curiosity, and a deep protective instinct he hadn't expected to feel.
He wondered about her story, what had brought her to this desperate moment, and whether he would be able to help her find the peace she clearly craved.
The woman, for her part, stayed quietly at the table, sipping her water, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cattle, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, the distant hum of insects. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small measure of calm. It wasn't safety, not completely, but it was a start. She could breathe without the sharp edge of fear pressing against her chest. Brash. She could look out at the open fields without seeing only threats and danger. By the afternoon, she was sitting by the window watching the cattle graze, and Daniel could see her slowly letting go of some of her fear. He didn't press her, didn't ask questions that might make her uncomfortable. He simply worked around her, letting her settle into the quiet rhythm of the ranch. He felt a strange connection forming, one built on trust and the unspoken understanding that she had nowhere else to turn. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the woman spoke softly.
I don't know how to explain why I said what I did earlier.
I felt I had no one. Daniel nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. "Sometimes," he said, "when we feel alone, we say things we don't fully mean. But what matters is that you're here now. You're safe, and we'll figure the rest out together." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time there was no fear, only a faint, fragile hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for not turning me away." Daniel smiled gently. "No, one should ever be left to face everything alone. Not when there's a chance to help." That night, she slept in a small guest room at the ranch, a simple bed with clean sheets and a blanket that smelled faintly of home. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and the ranch lay quiet under the stars. Inside, a small, fragile peace had taken hold. For the first time in what felt like forever, the woman felt that maybe, just maybe, she could start to hope again. Daniel sat on the porch, looking out at the wide open fields. He thought about the morning, about the stranger who had appeared at the fence, and about the weight of responsibility he now carried. But he knew this: he had made the choice to help. And that choice, simple as it seemed, had changed everything. The ranch, once just a place of routine and labor, had become something more. It had become a sanctuary, a place where a life in danger had found a moment of safety, a place where trust had begun to grow. And for Daniel, that was enough to keep him awake on the porch, thinking, planning, and quietly hoping that tomorrow would bring another small step toward healing and hope for the young woman who had walked into his life so suddenly and so urgently. The next morning, the ranch was calm in the soft light of dawn. Daniel moved through his usual routine, checking the fences and making sure the cattle were safe. The young woman, whose name was Emily, sat at the small kitchen table, sipping her coffee quietly. The warmth of the drink seemed to calm her, and she glanced out the window at the fields stretching endlessly into the distance. For a moment she felt the sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. But peace was fragile. But, Emily's eyes occasionally flicked toward the door, as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. The memory of her past troubles pressed against her mind like an invisible weight. Breath. She had escaped a life full of fear, isolation, and danger, and though she was safe now, the shadows of her old life still followed her. Daniel noticed her unease. He didn't push her to speak, but he sat across the table, quietly drinking his own coffee, giving her the space she seemed to need. After a long silence, Emily spoke, her voice soft but shaky. I guess you want to know why I ran, why I said what I said yesterday." Daniel nodded gently, encouraging her without words. He understood that trust could not be rushed. Emily took a deep breath and began. She told him about her family, about how life at home had become unbearable for her. Her father, she explained, was a man who ruled the house with anger and fear. He shouted often, criticized constantly, and punished harshly for mistakes that seemed small to everyone else. Her mother, weak and quiet, did not intervene, and Emily felt trapped. Every day was a struggle to survive emotionally, to avoid provoking the wrath of the man she was supposed to call father. "I tried to leave before," Emily admitted, her eyes downcast, "but there was nowhere safe. I had no money, no friends I could trust, and I felt that if I stayed, I would lose myself. I thought, maybe," breaths, "maybe it would be better if I didn't exist." Her voice cracked, and Daniel could see tears forming at the corners of her eyes. He reached across the table, placing a hand near hers, not touching but close enough to show presence. "Emily," he said softly, "I'm glad you're here."
"I'm glad you chose life, even when it felt impossible." Emily looked at him, unsure.
She had never known someone to speak so calmly, so firmly, without judgment. It was strange, almost unreal, to hear words that were meant to comfort instead of punish or scare. For the first time, she felt that maybe someone truly cared. Over the next few days, Emily began to settle into a small routine at the ranch. She helped with simple chores, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, watering the small vegetable garden. Daniel showed her the rhythm of ranch life, teaching her the proper way to handle small tasks while giving her space to find her own comfort. Even in this simple routine, moments of tension returned. Emily would flinch at sudden noises or withdraw when Daniel approached quickly. Daniel, patient and observant, realized that these reactions were not defiance, they were remnants of fear, habits formed in years of feeling unsafe. He did not chastise her. Instead, he adjusted, moving slowly, speaking softly, and allowing her to regain confidence at her own pace. One afternoon, Daniel asked her to help him check the fences on the far side of the property. As they walked together, the wind rustling through the grass, Emily's hands were wrapped around the straps of her small bag and her gaze lingered on the horizon. Do you ever think about going back?" Daniel asked carefully. Emily shook her head, though her lips trembled. "I can't. I don't know if I could survive it. Dispased, alone. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but Daniel heard the pain behind it. He kept walking beside her, careful not to crowd her. "You're not alone now," he said. "You don't have to be." He glances around in despair, and you don't have to face anything alone. Emily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She wanted to believe him, but trust had never come easily in her life. Still, there was something in his calm presence, the way he didn't rush her, the way he didn't demand answers, something that made her feel that maybe, just maybe, she could start again. As the days passed, small moments of connection began to form between them. Daniel would occasionally share stories of the ranch, of his childhood, and the hard work that had built the land into what it was today. Emily listened quietly, absorbing not just the words, but the sense of stability and order they represented. She began to see that life could be different, that not every person brought fear or pain. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Emily asked Daniel a question she had been holding back. How do you stay calm? Even when things go wrong, even when life is hard? Daniel paused, thinking.
I suppose it's because I have routines, because I focus on what I can do, not what I can't.
And because I try to help where I can. It doesn't fix everything, but it helps me face the day. Brash. Emily nodded slowly, taking in his words. It was strange to hear someone speak about life without bitterness or anger. She realized she had spent so long expecting the worst from everyone that she had almost forgotten hope. But even as she began to trust, moments of fear returned. One afternoon, a noise outside startled her. A car door slamming far down the road. Her body tensed, and she froze, her mind racing with memories of people who had hurt her in the past. Daniel noticed immediately, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "Psst, it's just a car. Nothing to worry about." Bye. Emily exhaled slowly, trying to calm herself. She realized that part of her healing would involve learning to feel safe again, to trust that the world could be ordinary without danger lurking at every turn. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe she could. As the weeks passed, Emily became more comfortable in her surroundings. She began to take small walks around the property, her steps growing steadier, her shoulders less tense. Daniel would accompany her, not to guard her, but simply to walk together, talking about nothing and everything. Weather, animals, small events on the ranch. These conversations, simple and ordinary, became a balm to her weary spirit. One quiet evening, Emily sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Daniel joined her, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of the cattle and the rustle of leaves in the wind. "I never knew it could feel like this," Emily said softly. "To just, Bess, sit and not worry, to feel safe."
I thought I'd forgotten what that felt like.
Daniel nodded. Safety doesn't always come from the world around us," he said. "Sometimes it comes from the people who care, from the choices we make to protect each other." Emily smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in weeks. It was fragile, but it carried hope. She realized that her life could change, that she didn't have to live in fear forever. And she understood, perhaps for the first time, that the kindness of a stranger, someone willing to take a risk for her, could be the first step toward healing. The bond between them grew slowly, built on small acts of trust, patience, and understanding. Emily began to speak more openly about her feelings, about her dreams, and about the small things that had once brought her joy but had been forgotten in the chaos of her past. Daniel listened without judgment, offering guidance only when needed, letting her find her own strength. By the end of the month, Emily's presence at the ranch felt almost natural. She had carved out a place for herself, a small but significant corner of the world where she could breathe and grow. And for Daniel, watching her gradually shed her fear and embrace life again was deeply rewarding. He felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his choice to help her had changed the course of a life. Though the past still lingered in Emily's mind, it no longer had the power to control her. She had begun to reclaim her sense of self, learning that life could be lived without constant fear, that kindness could exist, and that hope was not something she had to chase. It could be found in simple moments, in small gestures, and in the trust she allowed herself to give. And through it all, Daniel remained a steady presence, a reminder that even in the darkest times there could be light, and that sometimes saving someone meant more than offering safety. It meant giving them a chance to believe in life again. The ranch had grown quiet in the early morning light. Daniel was already out checking the fences, the soft clatter of his boots on the wooden steps echoing faintly in the cool air. Her eyes scanning the horizon. The past few weeks had brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years, and she had begun to let go of some of the fear that had weighed her down for so long. She was learning that life could feel ordinary and safe even after so much pain, but peace, she knew too well, could be fragile. Breaths. That afternoon, as the sun reached its peak and the ranch buzzed with the quiet sounds of animals and wind through the fields, a sudden noise startled Emily. The distinct sound of a car door slamming echoed from the dirt road that ran near the edge of the property. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, her mind instantly flooding with memories of her past. Angry voices, doors slamming, the feeling of being trapped. Daniel, noticing her stiff posture from across the yard, walked over. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. Nothing to worry about." Emily tried to breathe deeply, but the fear lingered. It sounds like someone is coming, she whispered, her voice trembling. What if they found me?" Daniel's brow furrowed. He had been careful to keep her safe, but he understood that fear didn't vanish overnight. He crouched slightly to meet her eyes. No one can hurt you here," he said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." "You're not alone, Emily. You won't have to face this on your own." Breath. Even as she nodded, trying to calm herself, Emily couldn't ignore the unease. That night, sleep was difficult. Desk. Every creak of the house, every distant sound outside made her heart race. Daniel, sensing her restlessness, offered to stay nearby until she felt safer. She had begun to trust him, but trust didn't erase fear instantly. The next day, while checking the far side of the property, Daniel noticed something unusual. A letter had been left near the fence post. Small, folded neatly, but unmistakably meant for her. Bet. Emily, who had come with him, froze when she saw it. Her hands shook as she picked it up. Daniel crouched beside her. "Do you want to read it here or inside?" he asked gently. Emily swallowed hard. I think inside," she said, her voice barely audible. Once inside, she carefully unfolded the paper. The words were short but threatening. Someone from her past had found her, and their message was clear. They wanted her to return, and they would not accept refusal. Breath. Fear pressed on her chest like a heavy stone. Daniel saw the panic in her eyes and placed a reassuring hand on hers. "We'll figure this out," he said calmly. "No one is going to make you go anywhere you don't want to. You're safe here." Emily nodded, but the worry did not leave her. She felt as though the walls of safety she had begun to build were suddenly fragile. That evening she sat on the porch, hugging her knees, lost in thought. Daniel joined her quietly, offering a warm cup of tea and a steady presence. "I don't want to go back," she said softly. "I can't. I don't think I could survive it again." Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of her fear. "Then you won't?"
We'll face this together. You're not alone anymore, Emily.
Not now, not ever. Over the next few days, Daniel took careful steps to ensure her safety. He checked the property more thoroughly, making sure all gates were secure and that any visitors would be noticed immediately. He also reached out discreetly to local authorities to ask for advice without revealing too much of her personal history. But Emily, though anxious, began to feel a sense of protection she had never known before.
Even with the looming threat, moments of ordinary life began to return.
Emily helped with chores, fed the animals, and even laughed softly at small shared jokes with Daniel. The bond between them strengthened, not only trust, but a quiet companionship built on understanding and patience. She realized that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return, and Daniel found a sense of purpose and fulfillment he hadn't expected to feel in years of solitude. Then, one afternoon, the tension broke unexpectedly. A vehicle drove slowly down the dirt road, and Emily's breath caught. She backed toward the house, panic rising in her chest. Breath. Daniel, sensing the urgency, stepped in front of her, calmly assessing the situation. The car stopped at the edge of the property, and a figure stepped out. A person Emily recognized from her past. Daniel's voice was steady, though his mind raced. "Stay behind me," he instructed quietly. Emily did as he said, gripping the back of a chair for support. The figure approached, confusion and anger written clearly on their face. But Daniel's calm authority and steady gaze made it clear that Emily would not be intimidated. The visitor demanded that Emily return with them. She stood frozen, her fear palpable. Daniel spoke firmly, explaining that she was under no obligation to leave, that she was safe, and that any attempt to force her would have consequences. The tension between past and present, fear and safety, hung thick in the air. But Emily, seeing Daniel's unwavering support, finally found her voice. "I'm not going back," she said, her words trembling but firm.
I won't go anywhere you want me to. I'm safe here.
Hesitant, the visitor, realizing that their threats held no power over her in this new environment, left angrily, warning that they would return. Daniel immediately made plans for additional precautions, ensuring Emily felt secure and understood that he would protect her at all costs.
After the visitor left, Emily collapsed into tears. She had faced a tangible threat from her past, yet she had not been alone. Daniel stayed with her, offering quiet comfort, listening to her fears without judgment. They spoke late into the night about what had happened, about the importance of trust, and about the courage it took to stand firm in the face of fear. In the following days, Emily slowly regained a sense of control over her life. She began to realize that safety was not just a physical state, but a mental one as well. Daniel encouraged her to take small steps, locking doors, maintaining routines, and communicating her needs clearly. These simple actions gave her a feeling of empowerment that she had not experienced before. The ranch, once a place of routine and solitude, became a sanctuary not only of safety, but of growth. Emily began to understand that the kindness and patience Daniel showed were not temporary gestures. They were a new foundation for life. She learned that her past did not have to define her future, that she could reclaim her independence without losing the protection and support that had allowed her to heal. Through it all, their bond deepened. Daniel's quiet strength and consistent presence provided Emily with the trust she needed to begin rebuilding her life. And Daniel, in turn, saw the impact of his actions in a new light. Helping Emily was no longer just an act of kindness. It was a shared journey of resilience, courage, and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Emily and Daniel sat on the porch together. She reflected on the past weeks, the fear, the uncertainty, and now the growing sense of hope.
I never thought I could feel like this, she said softly.
Safe. Like I belong somewhere. Daniel nodded, offering a gentle smile. You do belong, Emily. And you always will. You've survived so much, and you're learning that life can still be good, even after everything. Emily rested her head on her hands, looking out at the open fields. The horizon stretched wide, filled with possibility, and for the first time, she truly believed that her life could continue without fear dictating every moment. He had faced her past, confronted her fears, and survived, and she knew that with Daniel's support, she could continue to do so. That night, Emily slept with a sense of calm she had not known before. The shadows of her past still lingered, but they no longer controlled her. She had found safety, trust, and the courage to face what came next. And Daniel, watching over her from the porch, felt a quiet pride and deep satisfaction in knowing that sometimes the choice to help someone could make all the difference in the world. The ranch was not just a place of work anymore. It had become a home, a refuge, and a place of healing. And in the hearts of both Daniel and Emily, a new chapter had begun, one built on trust, understanding, and the quiet courage it took to confront fear together. The days following the confrontation with the visitor were quieter than Emily had expected. The tension that had haunted her, the fear that had crept into every corner of her life, began to loosen. Presence and guidance, she was slowly learning that safety was more than just being free from immediate threats. It was about having someone she could trust, someone who would not let her face danger alone. In the mornings, the ranch woke slowly with the soft light of dawn. Emily had begun to help with chores in a more confident way. She fed the chickens, gathered eggs, and watered the garden, each small task reinforcing a sense of normalcy and stability. Daniel watched her with quiet approval, impressed not only by her growing competence, but also by her courage. Even in the simple acts of daily life, she was reclaiming a part of herself that had been hidden under years of fear. One morning, while walking across the fields to check on the cattle, Emily spoke hesitantly.
Daniel,
I've been thinking, she said softly, about what I want to do next, how I want to live my life.
Daniel looked at her attentively, sensing the importance of her words. Take your time, he said gently.
Breath. You don't have to decide everything at once. Just tell me what's on your mind.
Emily took a deep breath. I want to...
Breaths. Finish school.
I want to learn things I missed when I was younger.
And I want to feel normal again, in my own way. Her voice quivered slightly, but there was determination beneath the uncertainty. Daniel smiled, quietly proud. Then we'll figure out how to make that happen. You deserve a chance to grow and learn, to build a life for yourself. In the following weeks, Emily began to explore her interests again.
Spent time reading, working in the garden, and learning more about the ranching life from Daniel. Every small victory, learning how to care for an animal, preparing a meal, or even simply walking across the property without fear, was a step toward rebuilding her confidence.
And with each step, the fear that had once consumed her began to fade. One afternoon, Emily received a letter in the mail. She hesitated, worried it might be from her past, but Daniel encouraged her to open it.
Inside was a notice from a nearby school, offering her enrollment and guidance to catch up on her studies.
Emily's hands trembled, but this time it was not fear. It was hope. She realized that she now had options, opportunities she had never imagined, and the chance to take control of her own life. That evening, As the sun set and painted the sky in warm, glowing hues, Emily sat on the porch with Daniel. She held the letter carefully in her hands, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her eyes. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "I never thought I'd have a chance to start over like this." Daniel reached out and placed a hand gently on hers. "You've earned this, Emily. You've survived so much, and now it's time to build something new for yourself, and you won't have to do it alone." For the first time, Emily truly believed him. The fear that had once ruled her life no longer felt insurmountable. With Daniel's support and her own determination, she could face the future with courage. The days turned into weeks, and Emily began attending classes at the school. She returned home each evening with stories of new lessons, new friends, and the small triumphs of learning. Daniel listened patiently, offering encouragement and guidance, proud of the determination she showed. He had seen her at her lowest, had witnessed the desperation in her eyes, and now he saw a young woman slowly discovering strength and independence. Life on the ranch continued peaceful, yet full of small adventures. Emily began exploring the surrounding fields, learning more about the land and the animals she cared for. Each new experience, each task she mastered, added to her confidence and sense of self. She realized that life could be ordinary and beautiful, that she could find joy in simplicity, and that she had the right to feel safe and happy.
One afternoon, while repairing a fence with Daniel, Emily paused to look at the horizon.
The sun was low, casting long shadows across the fields, and the wind carried a soft, comforting chill. "I feel free," she said quietly. "I know there's still more to do, more to face, but for the first time, I feel like I have control over my life."
Daniel nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "Freedom doesn't mean there won't be challenges," he said.
"But it means you have the courage to face them, and the support to help you through." Emily smiled, the warmth in her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to believe in her own strength. And though the past would always be a part of her, it no longer defined her. She had begun to write her own story, one where fear was replaced by resilience, despair replaced by determination, and isolation replaced by connection. Over time, Emily became more than a guest at the ranch. She became part of it. She worked alongside Daniel, learning about ranch life and sharing in the responsibilities that came with it. She found joy in simple accomplishments, pride in her growing independence, and comfort in the steady presence of someone who had chosen to stand by her side. Daniel, too, found that his life had changed. The quiet routine of the ranch was now filled with shared stories, laughter, and the satisfaction of seeing Emily grow. He realized that helping her had not only saved a life, it had transformed his own. The connection they shared was not romantic, but it was deeply human, rooted in trust, respect, and mutual care. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky and the ranch was bathed in silver moonlight, Emily stood on the porch, looking out over the fields. The fear, the escape, the confrontation, and the gradual rebuilding of her life. She knew that challenges would come again, that life was never entirely predictable, but she also knew that she could face them. She was no longer alone, and she had the strength to keep moving forward. Daniel joined her, standing quietly at her side. They watched the sky together, the soft sounds of the ranch surrounding them. "Thank you," Emily said softly, breaking the silence. "For everything. For believing in me. For keeping me safe." Daniel smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me. You made the choice to keep going. I just helped you see that you didn't have to do it alone."
Emily nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and peace.
The journey had been difficult, but it had led her to a place of hope, safety, and belonging. She realized that life, even after hardship, could be full of possibility, and that she could choose how to live it. The ranch, once just a place of work and solitude, had become a sanctuary, a home, and a space for healing. And in the hearts of both Emily and Daniel, a quiet understanding had formed. Life could be hard, but kindness, trust, and courage could make all the difference. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly overhead, Emily felt a sense of completion. She had faced her fears, confronted the remnants of her past, and found a place where she could grow and thrive. The darkness that had once seemed overwhelming now felt distant, replaced by light, hope, and the steady knowledge that she was not alone.
In the days that followed, Emily continued to rebuild her life, learning, growing, and embracing new opportunities.
She attended school, cared for the ranch, and found joy in small moments of beauty and accomplishment.
She had discovered that life was not about escaping the past, but about creating a future filled with hope and possibility.
And Daniel, watching her with quiet pride, knew that sometimes the simplest act of kindness, opening a door, offering a place of safety, and believing in someone when they could not believe in themselves, could change the course of a life. The ranch had become more than land and livestock. It was a place of second chances, resilience, and the enduring power of human compassion.
Emily's journey was far from over, but she faced it with courage, hope, and the knowledge that she had the strength to continue.
The bond between her and Daniel, forged in trust and shared experiences, would remain a source of support and guidance for years to come. And as she looked out over the fields that stretched endlessly before her, she realized that her life, once filled with fear and uncertainty, was now filled with possibility, promise, and the quiet peace of finally feeling safe.